My name is Stephanie with Climbing the Seven Summits. Hey, everyone. So, with no further ado, it's time to introduce who you're all here to see, which is Edgar and Benny. So, let's go ahead and start with Edgar. Edgar, Ecuador is your home country. Cotopaxi is in your backyard. We are so excited to hear from you today as our Ecuador specialist. So, if you could go ahead and share a little bit more about your relationship with the mountains growing up in Ecuador and more about you as a mountain guide.
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Edgar Parra. I'm from Ecuador. My culture is kind of indigenous. I was born in a foot of the mountain, big mountain, Cotopaxi. I was, since a childhood, very wondering about what's going on after the mountain, after that mountain. So that kind of like pushed me to go into this world. So when I was like 14 years old, I was introduced to the one of the mountaineering clubs. And then I started everything. I kind of fell in love with the mountains, with the big mountains. Then, like when I was like a little bit older, like when I was 19, I get into the local school of mountaineering, and then I got my certification to work legally. But beside that, like in back in 2016, also I did like my certification of international mountain guide. Besides that, like I was traveling around the world. This allows me also to climb it like the last year, like successfully, like Everest. So I've been in different big mountains in the world, like Denali, Aconcagua many times in one of the seven summits. And my wife is Russian, so I'm a lot of time in these areas in Caucasus, in Tian Shan area. Yeah. Besides that, also like my love for the mountains start like I think like there in where I was born. That's more or less my background, and I really like happy to help with everything you need, and any questions are more than welcome.
Wonderful, Edgar. Thank you so much. We did a little quick math earlier, and I think it was you said you'd been guiding for over 26 years.
Exactly. I was like, yeah, first of all, from the age of 14 to 20 years old, I used to work like kind of like not really officially. But after that, I start like with a certification and stuff like that. Kind of like professionally, I'm working more than 26 years already in different continents in the world, not only in South America, but also I used to live in Germany. I used to live in Europe, in Russia. The last 4 years, I'm going to Himalayas, been to Denali 3 times. Yeah, I love ice climbing, white mountains with glaciers, with the crevasses, with seracs. This is my kind of fascination, you know.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Awesome. So
You-
now we're going to move on to Benny. Benny, we brought you on board. You are not from Ecuador. You are from here stateside in the US, but you are one of our 8,000-meter specialists. You've been on Everest, you've been on things like K2, and I know you've climbed around the world. So we really wanted to bring your perspective here since Ecuador is such a great peak to bridge kind of being a newer climber and being a more advanced climber. So, Benny, can you share more about your background, how you got into climbing, and what does that mean to be an 8,000-meter specialist?
Yeah, so I'm Benny. I live in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm one of the guides, and I grew up in New Hampshire. I had a fascination as a kid with reading books and looking at photos of Mount Everest and things in Antarctica. I didn't know anybody in the mountains. I grew up playing sports and very normal things, but I always felt like someday I want to go out in the world and do something, And when I was in college, I reconnected to that, reading more mountaineering books, and finally I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go. So I went to Washington, I went to the Cascades, and I did a mountaineering course there for over a month. I was out with a bunch of like-minded people living in the mountains and carrying an ice axe for the first time. And I remember looking out at other bigger mountains being like, wow, those look really tough, but just stayed with it. And it's been about 10 years now. I've been full-time climbing, and yeah, I've traveled all over the world, and I love it. I think climbing's an incredible thing. It gives you a way to travel the world aside from the challenges that you'll find on the mountain. So yeah, mountaineering is everything to me. If you have any questions about your progress and you have a vision for yourself of where you want to go, and feel free to ask me. I'm happy to give some sort of advice, and hopefully it's useful to you, and hopefully see you on a mountain as well.
Awesome. Benny, thank you for that. And thinking back to our original conversation too, and I remember working up your bio that we have on our website, You have this great, wonderful guiding resume and background, but so much of what you do is your personal climbing. And I think that's one thing that's really neat is you have a lot of notable first ascents. Like you said, the mountains are your life. And whether you're out there professionally or you're out there personally, it seems like it's really got you on all sides, which is really cool. Any notable first ascents or anything you want to share personally that you've done?
Yeah, I've done a lot of things in Alaska. It's funny when we leave like a big expedition, like an Everest expedition, everybody's ready to go home and rest, and I'm like already on my phone looking at the maps and trying to figure out where we're going to go now for fun. And so I'm kind of always at it. In the winter, I ice climb a lot and I seek out new frozen waterfalls that maybe people haven't climbed yet, things like that. Use the bush point a lot to get into the mountains. And I do a lot of product development work with brands in the outdoor industry, like Mountain Hardware. So that's a great time for more product testing and ideation. Yeah, I just wake up every day and think about the mountains, to be honest, whether it's guiding or for fun.
That's cool. All right. So, folks, as they've been introducing themselves, Edgar and Benny, you've probably been taking a look at our agenda also. So, I'll review that really quickly. We're going to start off with some fast facts, get everyone on the same page for Ecuador. And then we're going to jump into where Ecuador fits into your progression, the peaks that we have on our program, of course. And then we'll start talking about our actual program. We have a couple of add-on things. We have a pre-acclimatization add-on. We also add on Chimborazo as a final climb as well. So those are ways you can modify this expedition to suit your needs. And then, of course, we'll talk about Cotopaxi and Cayambe as well. We'll wrap things up with a conversation about training, gear, how you can include your friends and family. Because as you've probably noticed, Edgar is one of the nicest people you're going to meet. And people in Ecuador are smiley. They're like that. And so bringing your friends and family to experience that culture and hospitality is really fun. And then we'll wrap things up with our climbing philosophy at CTSS, what sets us apart, and then our contact, of course. So let's go ahead and jump into it. And before I forget, Edgar and Benny, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for giving your time and being wonderful guides with climbing the 7 summits. We really appreciate you both here. So to kick things off, I'm going to go over a couple of fast facts. These are just general facts about Ecuador, the region holistically, so we can all find it on a map and things like that. Ecuador is in South America. It's on the same time zone as New York, the Eastern time zone. So that's where Ecuador is on the map. And then I do want to show you that there's a little circle. That's the Galapagos Island. We'll talk about the Galapagos Island at the inn with family and friends, but that is part of Ecuador, and those two are closely connected. And so just for our visual sake, that's where it is in South America. Now, Ecuador itself has these 2 giant mountain kind of fingers that come down off the Andes Mountains. And they're in what we call 2 parallel chains. And then in between is the avenue of volcanoes. So 3 volcanoes we're going to be talking about today, Cotopaxi, Cayambe, and Chimborazo. They're all 3 superstars. They all have something really unique and special. Not just like a fun peak to climb, but being Cotopaxi, the world's tallest active volcano, Cayambe, the only glacier to cross the equator, and then Chimbo, which is the furthest from the Earth's center, even beating out Mount Everest, which I'm actually going to show you a slide on in just a moment. So we'll be talking more about this in just a second, but this really paints a little bit of a picture of some highlights of Ecuador, some highlights of the mountains we're climbing, but we're going to let Edgar and Benny tell you about all the details of what it's like to climb. And just to really round this out, Ecuador is known for its hot springs, its culture, its food, its hospitality, just being a wonderful place to visit. I know one of the most common questions we actually get about Ecuador is it safe to travel to? And this is a really great question to ask. It is absolutely appropriate. It's something we should think about whenever we travel. So, is Ecuador safe to travel to? Here at CTSS, we do feel like it's a safe place to travel to. Right now, in the US, the State Department lists it as a level 2, which means you'd exercise increased caution. Same thing if you went to France, if you went to Mexico, places like that. And so you can find out the information about how things are going in Ecuador just by visiting the State Department or some equivalent in your home country. Here at CTSS, though, I want to assure everyone, we monitor geopolitical events closely. If something is happening, in Ecuador, we're on the phone with Edgar asking him, what's it like? What's going on? How are things? So we have teams on the ground in all these different places we climb, and we're always touching base with those people that are on the ground. And we always look at what the State Department is saying too, just to back up what Edgar is saying and what he's sharing about Ecuador. But we love going to Ecuador, and we think it's wickedly fun. So I mentioned this, I gave you a little heads up earlier. Ecuador in Chimbo has the furthest from the Earth's center peak, which is really cool. And this is actually because of the Earth not being a perfect sphere. I know when we look at the globe and we look at a map, it looks like a perfect sphere, but it's a little bit oblong. It's a spheroid, and it's slightly flattened because we're spinning so fast. It creates some force. It pushes the equator actually out a little bit. And because of that, Mount Chimborazo is actually the furthest from the center of the Earth. Of course, Everest is the highest above sea level. And then we've got another one if we're including below sea level right over there. But Chimborazo is a really unique one because you are actually physically the farthest from the center of the Earth because of the equator. Alrighty, so that was enough of a science lesson. I think that's all I have to say on that. Edgar, do you want to add anything about Chimbo being the furthest from the center of the Earth?
Yeah, of course, Chimborazo, they say like to complete a little bit this information is like the closest point to the sun. You know, sun here in our culture is like our God. We don't forget about the sun because sun is our inti, our God. So also a lot of people who are like following this energy, this, Pachamama or something is like, is closest to the sun and they want to climb because of that. It's very important to make a kind of a remark about that. Closest point to in the planet to the sun.
I love it.
About that, and yeah, it's a beautiful mountain. It's not too difficult to climb. It's beautiful.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for that. Just kind of from your perspective of what it means from an Ecuadorian to be on Chimbo and to be enjoying that. So before we jump into the actual itinerary and our programs and our add-ons, we are going to give Edgar and Benny just a little bit more time to talk about what makes climbing in Ecuador so unique. You've already heard a little bit about Ecuador. You've heard about those 3 peaks being standalone, really unique and special climbs. And I'm going to go ahead and let them tell you a little bit more about what makes it really unique. So Edgar, of course, we're going to kick off with you and tell us just a little bit more about climbing in Ecuador.
Sure, absolutely. You know, Ecuador, it's one of the smallest country maybe in the world, but for sure regarding mountaineering, is the smallest in South America. But you know, like the mountains that's very close to each other, and the big mountains, not like let's say 13 or 14, but they are like 15,000 feet, 5,000 meters, and we have Chimborazo, 6,000 meters. They are very close each other because Ecuador is such a small country. It's not only regarding the mountains, but also, you know, we have jungles, we have Galapagos, we have many different like kind of worlds, we say like 4 worlds in such a small country. Also, you know, like here talking about like why is unique for climbing in Ecuador is also the weather. You know, we don't have like kind of winter, or we don't have kind of like summer. We have like, I would say like the spring, an eternal spring there. So you can climb the whole year round. It makes like a very easy to plan. It's like I go April, I go in the end of the year. You can choose whenever you want to come to Ecuador. It's not necessarily just vacations or in the high season, but it's very important. Yeah, you know, the weather is like, you know, we're blessed with the weather here. The other one is very accessible because, you know, the roads, the infrastructure in Ecuador is getting better and better. We have like, you know, paved roads up to maybe 14,000 feet or even 15,000 feet in Chimborazo. So it's easy to access to our mountains. And yeah, the other thing is we have like the terrains in the mountains. They are being a volcanoes. They are not super like steep mountains. They are not super technical mountains. I'm not telling like it's easy to climb, but it's a bit easier than the other ones. So that makes also unique, you know, place in the South America, in the whole continent to climb these mountains. The other thing is like we have a good infrastructure regarding the accommodation. We have beautiful refuges with the, you know, beds, toilets. We have like a high camp in Chimborazo, for instance. It's really nice to have those facilities. We don't need to carry like the tents or a lot of, you know, utensils to cook or stoves. but it makes easier to climb. We say like we suffer a little bit, but in between also, in between the mountains, we have beautiful haciendas, beautiful places to stay after suffering 2 days, which is not really suffering. And then also we have like a really fresh food, fresh vegetables, we have fresh fruits. It's really, really nice to have those up in the mountains. Sometimes, when you are in an expedition, sometimes you just have like a packed food, which is kind of like, sometimes it's not good to eat, no? But here in Ecuador, we have like really good and fresh, healthy food. And then, yeah, like flies. Flies are, very accessible from Europe, from America, from everywhere. We are very connected. And you are like right away at nearly 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters. So it's very, convenient for acclimatization. And then you start like your whole expedition from that altitude. And of course, the beauty of the mountains makes like unique. Cotopaxi, for example, is like a very iconical mountain. Is a perfect conical mountain. It's like you fall in love right away with that mountain. Chimborazo, of course, the highest here. Everybody kind of says, if I go to the most beautiful volcano, but I need to go also to the highest in the country. And of course, Cayambe, it's like, the only place in the world which is the mountain on the equator is very, very unique. That makes kind of unique things to come to climb in Ecuador.
Wonderful, Edgar. Thank you for that. Folks,
You're
you
welcome.
hear us over and over talking about the ease of accessibility for all these peaks, the ease of the mountain huts, and how enjoyable that is. But as Edgar said, let's not confuse that with the ease of the terrain. The terrain is still glacial, there's still crevasses, it is still technical terrain. And so we just want to be really clear that when we're talking about the ease, it's a lot of things that are going to make your trip enjoyable, wonderful, embrace the culture and the hospitality of Ecuador. But the climbing, just like this picture right here, is going to still be full on. It's still technical. Now, Benny, I know you just visited Ecuador for the first time, and you went to Ecuador right after you got off Everest. So tell us a little bit more about your first experience in Ecuador and how this really felt coming off of Everest.
Yeah, I would say what you just mentioned actually about sort of the ease of access, but still the very legitimate mountains is a good segue to what I wanted to say. Mountain climbing is tough. So if you want to go all over the world and climb different mountains, there's a lot to learn, right? Like how to take care of yourself in the cold, the snow, the wind, how to camp, how to eat right. And everybody sort of has their own way to do it. I wish that I had gone to Ecuador a long time ago when I was newer to actually going off into the world and climbing. It's a unique place because it's really easy to get to, like they were mentioning. I'm going to harp on a lot of these points here. You stay in these amazing huts, and then you go up on these mountains, and all of a sudden you're like up on a big mountain, and you're actually doing it. But you didn't have to do the Alaska thing, which is how I learned, where you like get dropped off by a ski plane in the middle of nowhere, and then there's a giant blizzard, and you didn't even climb, you're just figuring out how to camp. So I felt like when I went there, it's a nice place to travel and climb. You get a little bit of both. And then if you want to climb at high altitude, if you just want to try it, or if you have an interest to do it, as far as Mount Everest, it's a wonderful place to try that and feel what that's like in a reasonable environment. You're not ever too far out there. So it's a good place to follow a guide up the mountain in the dark and like stick your nose into the wind and figure it out. And of course, it's just a beautiful country. So yeah, I recently guided a trip and we did Cotopaxi and Chimborazo. It's great to do one of the lower ones, Cayambe or Cotopaxi first, and then go to Chimborazo. And they're a little bit different than each other. They're almost like a step up from doing if you went like Mount Baker to Mount Rainier. This is like a trip like that, but at a higher altitude. The weather's going to come and go on you probably, and you're going to have to learn how to take care of your hands, things like that. So yeah, it's just a great trip. And I think people that are interested in going other places should definitely go here.
Perfect. And I just looked it up, Benny. I was kind of curious. So I looked up Lobuche East. I looked up our itinerary for that. It takes 10 days just to get to Lobuche Base Camp, which is kind of a similar intermediate peak to these Ecuadorian peaks that we have here. 10 days just to get to Lobuche Base Camp, where you can do this whole itinerary in 10 days that we're talking about now, which is kind of wild that you can just get to the start of one peak or wrap up this whole thing and be in and out of Ecuador by the time you've gotten to Lobuche.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to go to Mount Everest one day, you don't just walk in the door and go on a 50-day trip. Like it's years of working toward that before you're going to go away from home maybe for that long. So this is one of those important steps for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, so we're going to move a little bit forward. Let's talk about where Ecuador fits into our climbing journey just a little bit. Because what we're looking at here are some pretty tall peaks, 5,000 meter and then a 6,000 meter peak for Chimborazo. And we're really looking at taking some of the skills that we know and applying them. There'll be a couple of things that you see on here that we're going to go over, like the word newer, not a new climber, is really important. So we're going to talk about it, how it fits in for newer climbers and where you're coming from, but then also how this can fit in if you are climbing at an advanced level, getting a final shakeout for Everest, Lhotse, Manaslu, something like that. So let's go ahead and start with Edgar talking about how Ecuador is really something that can fit the pieces of the puzzle together and make big things happen if you are newer to climbing.
Yeah, of course, definitely. Ecuador is like, we say, like kind of the starting point of big projects, maybe big mountains in the world. We have a bunch of possibilities here, including, like, glacier training, kind of, like getting to the acclimatization properly, how to do things in the mountains, how to prepare, like technically, because here is so close, everything. Like, as I told you, it's such a small country and has like possibilities for that. For instance, we have like this pre-acclimatization in Antisana, which is like only 2 days, but fits to your itinerary if you have a little bit longer time. And then, of course, like this, prepare for the higher mountains like Cotopaxi, like Chimborazo, and for other climbs around the world. But here's kind of the starting point of like, sometimes even people come here like for the first time to touch the glacier or to feel the altitude, which is like, very, very makeable here, this in Ecuador, in our mountains. Also, as I told you, as I repeat all the time, you can do not only like a certain amounts of months in the year, but you can try any month, anytime.
Awesome. So the question is, how does this trip compare to the difficulty of Kilimanjaro or Aconcagua? So Edgar or Benny, have you been on Kili?
No, I haven't actually. That's the one continent I have not climbed on.
Oh,
Me
very.
neither.
So I can speak about this a little bit. I haven't been on Kili, but I did have a really nice conversation with Caroline and Mike about what trips we wanted to put on this slide right here as a trip to do beforehand. If you notice, we only included the Mount Baker Alpine Academy. We had toyed around with putting Kilimanjaro on here or not. Kilimanjaro is certainly giving you that altitude. So in terms of altitude, it's going to be fairly comparable. But on Kilimanjaro, if you've been on there, you're not really using a lot of technical glacier skills at all. You can climb Kilimanjaro with no technical skills for cramponing, using an ice axe, being on a rope team, things like that. So as a comparison to Kilimanjaro, in altitude, yes, but in skill set that you need to be on this mountain, it's not really one that we plug to do beforehand. But again, it's a great peak to get your altitude, and it's just Kilimanjaro, a stunning peak in its own right, and going to Tanzania is really special. And then the other question was, how does it compare to Aconcagua? Sounds like maybe both or either of you have done Aconcagua. Perhaps one of you can speak to that.
Yeah, of course, like it's a bit different mountains, a kind of different terrains, different latitude. I would say Aconcagua is like a kind of the next step. Even Aconcagua doesn't have like a much like, glacier or so, but it's altitude, but it's different like skills you should learn. And you could learn right here in Ecuador how to deal with, with the equipment. Aconcagua is more like, 3 weeks or something like that of coldness, of it's not comfortable, the food is a little bit complicated to deal with. But here in Ecuador, of course, the glacier and stuff like that is kind of more technical, but there is more like expedition style. Here is more like alpine style. I would say it's not easier, it's kind of like just different. But I would suggest maybe like Ecuador, first step, and then the next step would be like Aconcagua. And then in progression like that, Aconcagua, then maybe Denali, and then maybe other bigger mountains. But Ecuador is a good starting point, and we can kind of puzzle together. Usually I offer kind of like that. Ecuador, and then maybe you go to Peru, Bolivia, end up with a Aconcagua or something like that, and then different places in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I think Aconcagua, I think like 3 weeks on the mountain, it's going to be windy, it's going to be cold, it's going to be hard. There's so many things that you're going to deal with on Aconcagua that you aren't dealing with in Ecuador. So Ecuador is so good at honing skills, making sure you're taking care of eating well, things like that. So if you then go to Aconcagua, those skills are dialed and you can focus on staying warm, your layers, the wind, sun protection,
exactly. Yeah.
all those hard things on Aconcagua, which really make it unique. Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. All right, now Benny, I know that you've really done a lot on those 8,000-meter peaks, and we want to talk a little bit about how Ecuador can make a great shakeout for these types of peaks. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to talk about that.
Yeah, 8,000-meter peaks are sort of like my true love. Every trip I go on, I sort of look at it like, well, how's it going to affect that? You know, am I going to be stronger and better there? And guiding there, I mean, people come from all over the world to these kinds of mountains and from different backgrounds, different levels of experience. And the people who perform the absolute best are the people who went on sort of the proposed journey of the company. When you go to different places, you hone different skills, right? You go ice climbing for a while, you have really good footwork. That's super helpful on a mountain. You go to Denali and you drag a sled and carry a heavy backpack in the wind, you're just going to get really tough. And that's really important. In Ecuador, you're putting together some of those smaller pieces to go do those bigger trips later on. You have to have good footwork walking up and down the mountain in Ecuador. You have to cover your face and put on your sunglasses at sunrise and learn how to pack your backpack the right way. And I had mentioned it before, but this is a really appropriate place to learn how to do that stuff with a guide. So I think in general, if your vision is to go to higher mountains, certainly if you want to climb up a mountain one day wearing an oxygen mask, you're going to need to know how to do stuff with your mittens already and how to communicate in the wind with your guide, things like that. And we really learn all those things there. And it's a beautiful place. So while you're doing it, you're looking around like, wow, this is such an unbelievable place. I can't believe I've never been here before. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents, is this is just sort of like you've gone to Mount Baker, maybe you've climbed Mount Rainier too, done some sort of mountaineering courses, and you're ready to do those things at a higher altitude. If you want to sleep at higher altitude one day, you first need to go to 5,000 meters, 5,500 meters, 6,000 meters. You know, this is that journey where you can touch all those points and learn about your body and how you feel and perform the skills that people have been teaching you.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Appreciate that perspective and, kind of coming off of your Everest season, how you really see Ecuador as a way to get there, a way to get to those bigger and higher peaks, to those 8,000, 7,000 meter peaks. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump forward to our first add-on program that we have. So our core program, just as a reminder, is Cotopaxi in Cayambe. You can add on a pre-expedition, and you could also add on Chimborazo on the end. So the pre-expedition is, of course, beforehand. Edgar has led this program numerous times and is a really big advocate of it, especially if you just need a little extra time. It's that more gradual approach. So Edgar, can you tell us more about this program and this skills training add-on?
Absolutely. We have the thought about this like a little training, like kind of a taste of the using of the equipment, approaching to the glaciers, feeling the altitude, kind of touching the nature. So we have choose like a beautiful scenario in a beautiful mountain, which is Antisana. Antisana is actually the fourth highest in Ecuador, but most probably one of the most technical mountains in Ecuador. We call it Denali, like this mountain. So it has a beautiful glaciers, kind of like a gentle terrains, kind of like a intermediate terrains. As in the picture, you can see maybe it's like a vertical terrains. It's really good, like like to involve a little bit in the technical part of the mountain. What we have in the program, actually, these 2 days also gives you like a sort of more confidence in terms of like using the equipment. Then, of course, also we kind of save time acclimatizing there, because if for some reason sometimes you don't really like are the best friends with the altitude. But these 2 days, they kind of like gives you an advantage to get more, like those red cells in your blood. And then you will be more acclimatized in this altitude. And then, of course, you will join the rest of the program, and then you might be with more confidence there, and you will be even maybe more success climbing this, doing this pre-acclimatization program.
Edgar, thank you for sharing all that about our pre-expedition add-on right there. And I want to just note that Ganesh just asked a question which really related to that I was reading and kind of answering. He was sharing that he's done Baker, he's been on Rainier, but due to weather, things like that, he didn't hit the summit, which happens. That's totally normal. But thinking about how he can prepare to be on the glacier, on the snow in general, worried about keeping up, the pacing, things like that. So something like this is going to get you to altitude a little bit earlier. So you have time to acclimatize, which is really nice. It's going to have extra time to get your rapport up with your guide, talk about what you're working on. It just gives you that one-on-one or even smaller group time with your guide so you can prepare and really feel comfortable. And then Ganesh, you asked about field training. There is also, we'll get to it in the itinerary. You'll see that there is a training day on Cotopaxi. That's really the only training day, but there is some field training, and then you're putting those skills to use right there. So I wanted to drop in and answer that out loud and share a little bit more and how it really connected back with this slide that we were on right here. But Edgar, thank you for sharing a little bit about that pre-trip that we offer. But now we're going to jump into our main program, the actual objectives and the itinerary overview. As we mentioned earlier, and I think Edgar mentioned this, our trips all originate in Quito, Ecuador, which is a really lovely city. And if you also notice, day 2, you are visiting the equator. You're going on a cable car. Benny, when you just did our program, I think you told a great story. Arriving in Ecuador, day number 2, tell us what happened.
We went to Cayambe and we drove way up this road. The weather was not good at the time, but I was shocked at how high the road went. Like where I live in Alaska, we have all these amazing mountains, but it's a really low land. And if you want to go to high altitude, it's going to be quite the journey. And yeah, we drove way up this road and it was like all foggy. It was me and the other guide I was working with. And all of a sudden you're looking at your altimeter and you're like, we're at like 15,000 feet, it's crazy. So when you get there, you're acclimatizing right away in Quito, which is great. Acclimatizing takes time. Everybody's different how they do it. But if you can get yourself sort of to the starting altitude of 9,000, 10,000 feet right away, that's a huge advantage to everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. I was also thinking about how you didn't realize that you were going to visit all these fun cultural places.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We ended up at the equator, and I didn't know that was even going to happen. They were like, "Oh, yeah, we're going to go on a city tour." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds great." And then we show up to this parking lot, and there's this, sign like, "Welcome to the equator." And I'd never done that in my life. So that was a funny time because I was actually having them take all these photos of me, which I was sending to my mom. And my mom is like more fascinated about me being at the equator than on the top of Mount Everest. She's like, wow, that's really cool.
So just in true CTSS fashion, we love to obviously climb the mountains, and that's what we're there to do. But we really like to connect in with the local culture, the hospitality, and some of the special things. A lot of our trips that go out of Nepal and Kathmandu also include city tour there. And so that's something that we find really special. We do it with Orizawa as well. So one thing I want to talk about here is, again, we're looking at a 2 or 3 peak type of situation, even more when you include on the acclimatization hike on day 3. And Benny, we were also talking about this, the idea of moving from mountain to mountain and how good that can be as a climber to get used to that. Can you speak more a little bit about that idea of moving from mountain to mountain and how that helps you as a climber?
The more you do it, the more you're going to need to be able to climb, many days in a row or many days in the same week, with short rest in between. And people don't always have the opportunity to do that. They go to Washington and do Mount Baker and then return to home. And that's totally fine. But on a longer expedition, going to Denali, Mount Vinson, things like that, you need to keep at it. And in Ecuador, because you're going to do multiple peaks, you sort of like, have this new high point in your acclimatization and work a little hard for it. And then you go down and like eat a big meal and rest. And then you end up at the next one the next day or the day after. And you're sort of doing this up and down, which I think is really good for your body. It helps you acclimatize better. And it's going to just teach your body how to do that on a longer trip.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know you mentioned also like summit or no summit, like you might not hit Cotopaxi for some reason, but maybe then Cayambe is yours and you got it and you got that one. And then you added on Chimbo and then you got that one. So it gives you this dynamic feel of summits and no summits and things like that, if that's what happens when you're actually on the mountain.
Yeah, yeah, you've got to be mentally tough in mountain climbing. You know, there's going to be wins and losses, and summited this one, didn't summit that one, the ups and downs. But either way, having the opportunity to climb multiple in a row, you like move on from that one, and now there's a new focus, whether you summited the last peak or not. It no longer matters, right? You're going to try again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Such a good perspective, such a good thing to practice. All right. Now, Edgar is going to be giving us a big rundown, really describing each of these three mountains, Cotopaxi, Cayambe, and Chimbo. We have a couple route maps in there, and then you're also going to see a note on elevation, the route we generally take, and then lodging. And again, highlighting that there are lodges, refugios, things like that listed on all of these climbs, which is really cool. So, Edgar, this is an iconic mountain. There's a brand here in the US with the namesake. It's the highest active volcano in the world. Cotopaxi just takes the cake. People know it, people love it. Tell us more about it. Tell us more about the climbing on it as well.
First of all, Cotopaxi is kind of a really, really special for me because it was the first big mountain that I climbed. And I used to see like from where I was born, I saw Cotopaxi nearly every day. Yeah, of course, like Cotopaxi is one of the highest active volcanoes in the world, first of all, and it's very, very iconical for us. It's like, it's kind of the most beautiful in Ecuador, maybe in the world, because it's the shape, It's like when you draw a picture when you are a child, it's like a perfect volcano. This is Cotopaxi. And then, of course, like Cotopaxi offers like really, really good terrains for climbing. The trail is kind of like the all the time there because it's one of the most popular in Ecuador. Before the pandemic, this mountain used to be like the number 6 in the world. So at least maybe 10 people every day used to climb the mountain. In the high season, of course, maybe up to sometimes it's a little bit difficult. Now it's crowded, it's more sometimes hundreds, but now it's limited only to 80 people max per day. So it's good. And then why it makes like that? Because Cotopaxi is slightly a little bit in the middle of the avenue of the volcanoes. Cotopaxi is not following the change of the eastern range, but it's a little bit more to the middle. That makes very special weather of Cotopaxi. Cotopaxi might be like maybe the whole year, maybe a couple of like 2 3 weeks, maybe bad weather altogether. Not like other mountains, no. That makes also very, very gentle mountain to climb. And then, of course, we have like accessibility for going to this mountain. The road goes like very high, and we have an amazing refuge there. Maybe it's one of the most beautiful refuges in the region. We have like a big dorms. We have like a nice living room, good kitchen, toilets inside, and it's really nice. Makes like very good for climbing this mountain. And like this mountain is also is not that much elevation gain to climb. It's a little bit less than 1,000 meters to climb, less than 3,300 feet to climb, which also makes like more attractive for climbing and relatively easier than these three big mountains like Cayambe or Chimborazo, easier. But also Cotopaxi is a little bit higher than Cayambe. But even though it's a bit easier than Cayambe than Chimborazo, yeah. And also, the terrain has like a so beautiful glacier, crevasses, has like, some seracs. It's beautiful terrain to be there. And the other thing is people there. All the climbers are like very excited. You see the energy there in the mountain. I think they really like to share the Cotopaxi, this and that, even the brand. But Cotopaxi is very kind of like is in the minds of every climber. Cotopaxi is very iconical. Yeah, this is about the kind of the facts of the mountain.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Folks, this is one of my core questions for Edgar that I had just been like pining over. Why do we plug Cotopaxi before Cayambe when Cotopaxi's higher? That feels like it would just be harder. And as he mentioned right there, the terrain is actually a little bit easier for route finding. The general crevasses are a little bit easier to navigate around. And then the weather being a whole lot more stable and dry makes for a generally easier climb than it's the next one, which we'll talk about, which is Cayambe. And so you'll see that elevation is just a little bit lower, but the climbing is actually harder on Cayambe. But before we switch to that, Benny, I know you did that one with Michelle and Keith. You said it was so beautiful for obvious reasons. We can see it here, and it's one we all know and love. But tell us a little bit more about your experience and what kind of skills you were working with on that mountain with Michelle and Keith while you were there, and how that's prepping you for big peaks.
Yeah, so this is a beautiful mountain. A lot of people know about this mountain and go there to climb it, but a lot of people never had the chance to. So first of all, I'm really grateful that the company sent me there because now I climb the mountain. And I'm like a climber. Like I geek out all day about this stuff. My house is full of mountain relics and things. So part of what I look for when I travel around the world is like what's like the mountain culture. And when you go to Cotopaxi, he touched on it a little bit. There's sort of this like guide vibe there. You go up in the hut that you stay at before you climb. It's full of photos and old ice axes and flags and old crampons. There's guides everywhere. They're all sitting together and they're laughing and it's like a whole scene. And you got there from, hiking a pretty easy, I don't know, hour and a half or 2 hours maximum to get there. So picture in the US, we always like show up with our giant backpack at the bottom. We're like, all right, it's going to be 4 days until we make it. This is like, okay, we're going to be there in like 2 hours and then we can really focus on climbing the mountain. So I get why they've built all that infrastructure there. They can take people there. Edgar obviously has a great program going and knows all about it. They've got it dialed there. So this is a great trip. The mountain's incredibly beautiful. And when you see it from afar or you're on it, it's just something it's like eye candy to you. And the climb, like they mentioned, it's not that long. So this is again a great spot to go to higher altitude, work on your cramponing, learn how to pack your pack the right way, things like that. And hopefully march to a high summit. Like when you're on the top, it is quite prominent. The ground around you is very, very low. So yeah, just an amazing peak and people should go there.
Perfect. Benny, I think that was one of the most kind of like poignant things you mentioned earlier was because of that hut, because of that vibe and the atmosphere that they've created there on the base of Cotopaxi or kind of partway up Cotopaxi, you can really focus on all these things like you just mentioned, dialing in your pack, learning to stay warm, figuring out your layering system, because you're working a little less hard at like, I had to build a snow cave and stay warm all night.
Yeah, absolutely.
With some water in the morning, and I'm struggling already, not even leaving camp. So I think that was really important. Just to mention that you get to dial in systems here that you oftentimes can't dial in when you're on other peaks. So really cool. Awesome.
Yep, it's all ready for you when you're there.
That sounds lovely. Alrighty, so we're going to move on to Cayambe. Cayambe is one that Benny hasn't climbed yet, but Edgar, of course, has been on Cayambe who knows how many times, but a lot of times, I'm sure. This one is the one that's on the equator. So that elevation has dropped just slightly. We're taking the normal route again. There is a refugio again on this route. So Edgar, go ahead and give us the rundown of Cayambe.
Absolutely. Cayambe, besides being like the only mountain on the equator line, is also a very interesting mountain, very is the next step after Cotopaxi, I would say. Why? Because, the weather is a little bit more complicated because this mountain, instead of being in this eastern change, is a little bit closer to the jungle. Maybe within 40 or 35 miles away, you are right in the jungle. Also, all the humidity hits sometimes the mountain, and sometimes suddenly the weather could change in that mountain. That's also why not many people are climbing this mountain. Also, the terrain can be a little bit more difficult to find. There might be not a trail to follow like in Cotopaxi. Also, this mountain has more crevasses, especially the last sections. You have a kind of big seracs. All the time there is a big bergschrund. We need to kind of negotiate that, kind of permanently that. Also, that makes also a little bit more difficult than the Cotopaxi, but not necessarily technical mountain. In terms technical is they consider easy, something difficult or something like that. But it's makeable totally. And then plus this mountain is a bit longer to climb. In Cotopaxi, you might need maybe 6 hours, 7 hours. This mountain might be maybe an hour more or 1.5 hours more. Might be 7 hours, 8, 9 hours only to climb to the top because the elevation gain is 1,200 meters. So it takes more time and it's a little bit more kind of wild mountain, I would say. You feel like there is not many people there, not many climbing teams there.
Now, Edgar, I can't help but notice that these people on this mountain look like they've been sprayed by snow. Can you talk a little bit about the weather? Because I think it's a little different than the dry, stable conditions on Cotopaxi, correct?
Exactly, as I told you, like a Cayambe location is like a close to the jungle, and all this humidity, sometimes with a strong wind comes right away to the mountain. It is not the snow that comes from, from the sky, but it's like a humidity coming from below. And then as soon as it gets to the, to the mountain or to the people in this case, it gets like, like a layer of like, froze ice. So sometimes, you end up like with a layer of big ice all over.
Yeah.
Sometimes even your beard or your face. It's very important to, have a good equipment. But afterward, we are going to talk about the equipment. Yeah,
Awesome.
that's kind of this humidity, this, in the picture you see, like this typical in Cayambe. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Edgar, thanks for giving us a nice rundown. Folks, this is the next step up from Cotopaxi. It's going to be a little more technical climbing, more crevasses, more seracs, a little bit higher. You're going up 12,000 or so meters, a little longer of a climb, and the weather is going to give it to you just a little bit more as well. So, you're ratcheting up, which we really like. Edgar sent me this picture last night. I absolutely love latitude and longitude lines. I love learning about them. I live at the 37th degree or 37th parallel here. And so it's really neat to see the 0 degree just in this sign on the way up to Cayambe. And I know, Benny, you were talking about seeing maybe the same sign. Is that the one you saw? I think there's like a fancier one too.
Yeah, and actually that road in the photos, a newer road is my understanding, and it's awesome. It
Yes.
goes quite
Yeah.
high.
Actually, talking about the road, like the road brings you right to the refuge. You don't
Yeah,
need
that's right.
to walk
Yeah.
anything. Like, it's you just park right there in the refuge. So you need 2 minutes to carry your duffels upstairs to the dorms.
But we're going to move forward to Chimbo or Chimborazo. So
Chimborazo, yes.
So here we have our add-on climb. So day 11 is on everyone's itinerary, which would have been your departure day. But instead, day 11, you would then go ahead and make your move over to Chimbo and make your way up to high camp to keep that acclimatization going. And then it would just be 2 additional days. So it's not a huge add-on in time-wise, but it's a huge add-on in the gains on the mountain that you can make. So, Edgar, I'm going to go ahead and have you tell us a little bit about the mountain itself, the climbing. And then, Benny, you did this one with Keith and Michelle just recently. So, we're going to talk about your experience on there as well. So, Edgar, I'll pass it back over to you.
Chimborazo being one of the, how to say, iconic also mountains. And like in our flag, we have like a shield. In the shield inside, there is like a mountain. This is Chimborazo. For all the Ecuadorians, Chimborazo has a lot of meaning. Besides that, Chimborazo, of course, the highest mountain in Ecuador, the king of the Ecuadorian Andes. Everybody would like to climb this mountain someday. But Chimborazo, of course, is a bit more technical. The terrains are like steeper, don't have like much crevasses, but it's like you are like climbing in a very high altitude. You should be very acclimatized. And then Chimborazo, but after Cayambe, after Cotopaxi, you would be like very good acclimatized for that mountain. But Chimborazo also offers like a really nice, already set up like camp. That's also like it's a kind of a permanent big dome tents up there at the 17,000 feet. It's really good. That helps a lot. You have like food there. You have access to toilet there. It's very nice to have those services up there. And also Chimborazo, like the infrastructure to get there is like also very good. The roads from Quito to that place is also really good, goes to 15,000 feet. But then from this point to the high camp, maybe 3 hours, sometimes you say like, I need some maybe porter or something. We have access to get porters there. There is also not many people there because it's higher, it's a bit more technical, it's less climb. Cotopaxi, of course, is kind of the attraction of all the climbers in Ecuador, but Chimborazo a little bit less. Also, it's not that crowded. Expect not to be too crowded that mountain as well. Of course, it's beautiful. By the way, it's one of the best sunsets because there is nothing between there and the Pacific Ocean. Whenever it's clear, it's the best sunsets maybe in the world. I have seen there in Chimborazo High Camp. It's so beautiful. It's highly recommended to climb that mountain.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Folks, if you're looking to get above 6,000 meters, this is really it. I know Edgar dubbed this when we were chatting earlier as the most accessible 6,000 meter peak in all of South America, which is saying something. There are a lot of tall peaks in South America. And so I think that that's really a nice thing just to hone in on is you can really get above that mark and do so in a short time frame, adding it onto your program while you're already in country. It's not a boring climb, it's a technical climb, but it's got big elevation and some big skills that you will work on. Now, Benny, I know you were just there. I think you said Chimbo is a must.
Absolutely. I love a big giant mountain. That's the whole game. And after going to Cotopaxi, like go on this drive toward Chimborazo and kind of looking for it out the window. And finally, you like turn the corner and you look way higher than you did at the other mountains. You're like, oh my gosh, that is definitely a big mountain. It's really beautiful. It kind of resembles Mount Rainier, I think, in just terms of its size. And it sort of has this wider top. It's a gorgeous place. And then when you get up there, you're going to hike like a few hours to get up to this camp. You sort of go through a basin and up onto a ridge line. You don't have to wear your climbing equipment that day, and you walk into this camp and they've got it all set up. And then you'll have dinner and you watch the sunset, and then you wake up in the middle of the night and everyone's kind of sneaking around the tent. And now you're like, oh my gosh, today is the day I'm going to earn my racing stripes by going to 6,000 meters or 20,000 feet. They're almost the same thing. This is a rite of passage as a mountain climber. So you like get your stuff on and then you go into the dining tent and look, the guides are already ready, of course. And then you climb up this big mountain and it's just awesome. You go on this long traverse, then you get up on this ridge. And again, there's really no crevasses, but it gets steeper and it just sort of keeps going. You feel like you're really leaving the ground. It was an amazing trip. And we actually did not have great weather. We got covered in the rime ice up there, but we did make the summit. And maybe it's the Alaska person in me, but I personally think it's nice to get the bad weather on that mountain because you get to learn about being covered in ice, which is kind of cool. And you get a photo of yourself covered in ice, which is a very unique thing. Your friends and family would be like, whoa, you're like covered in a shell of ice. So yeah, this is an awesome peak. It's sort of the next obvious step. And if you're already there, you already acclimatized, add this on, go try that. If everything works out, you'll stand on a really high summit. I feel like different than the other ones. You really feel high altitude. There's something different about going above 6,000 meters. And then you're ready to go off in the world to high altitude mountains, sort of your choice at that point. People are going to be interested in you joining their trip. So yeah, it's a rite of passage. Very cool mountain.
Benny, I know you mentioned a few technical skills as ones you were really able to hone in on while you were just there, both pacing and breathing, and then footwork skills as well. Do you feel like that's a great place to learn them for those bigger and taller peaks? Can you tell us a little bit more about learning those skills and why they're so important?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most people are not used to walking very slowly up a frozen mountain in the dark, making the same movements and doing it really well every single time, and then breathing less oxygen than you're used to, right? So again, what we've been talking about, this is a journey that you have to go on to learn all these things. And on Chimborazo, once you get up, near 5,900, 6,000 meters, different than Cotopaxi, you're going to keep going. And above that altitude of Cotopaxi summit, the breathing and the pacing is different. And the guides, they know really well how to set you up for success doing that. So you get to practice sort of following someone and what the pace is like at a higher and higher altitude. On Mount Everest, for example, like we go quite slowly when we're, when we're up on above the high camp, above the South Col, and the people who rush and hurry, we call it the dash and crash. They like, do a bunch of steps and then they like burn out and they're like, it's so hard, they're like, look at the person next to you who's walking just like the guide. One more step, one more step. So you're going to practice that here. And it's a good place to do it because the mountain, like the other ones, it sticks way up into the sky, but you didn't walk 10 days to get up there. You get to practice all this stuff. So this is a great peak. And like the other ones we were talking about, you get up in the middle of the night and get your stuff on. And it's a very novel experience that it's one of the most important things in mountain climbing to me. So I just love the feeling of like, yeah, when you're on Chimborazo, you get your ice axe and the wind's kind of blowing. You don't know what's above you and if you're going to make it. So yeah, it was just a great trip.
Awesome. Benny, I know the photos we saw from you being on there, it was like that very wind-blown look and feel.
Yeah, I had probably 2 inches of rime ice on my jacket.
That's wild. Well, we have a great segue into a couple of questions. We had two really good questions come in. I want to answer John's first. So he just asked for a little recap of the elevation gains for the three peaks and the duration. So correct me if I'm wrong. This is from memory. Cotopaxi was about 1,000 meters a gain, 6 to 7
Yes.
hours, you said? Okay.
Yes.
Cayambe
Okay.
was 1,200 meters of gain from the hut,
Yeah.
7 to 9 hours, you said?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm doing the math here. It's about 2,000 feet, not meters, of gain. Is that correct? But you got to get up a little higher. Can you tell us more about how much the gain is for Chimbo and then how long you're actually climbing on Chimbo, Edgar?
Of course. Chimborazo is less than 1,000 meters. You start at 5,350 meters up to 6,300, more or less. So it's less than 1,000 meters, the elevation gain. But despite of being shortest than the other ones, this one is higher, is steeper. So you might end up taking more time. Maybe sometimes 8 hours, sometimes 9 hours. Also might depend the conditions of the mountain. This mountain can be sometimes it can be icy. Sometimes we need to do like some little technical stuff to lower down the clients, to lower down it, in the difficult sections, in the scramble areas. So it takes also more time to go down, maybe sometimes even up to 4 hours or something like that. Might be like maybe 12 hours, 13 hours from high camp to the high camp. And then you still need to go down to the lower part of the parking lot if you are going to go down to the city after the climb.
Perfect. Awesome. Great time to do a recap of the gains and the time on the mountain because it's really what makes Ecuador really special is you can get those three big peaks in, you can get up high, but you can do it in that 13-day time frame if you do all three. Now, Julia asked a great question as well that I want to ask. These mountains, we put up our routes that we normally do, which were all the normal routes, the most straightforward, the most kind of commonly used routes. Do these peaks offer different routes that are more technical? Just like Aconcagua offers a number of different routes, even Kilimanjaro. Are there other routes on these three peaks that we're looking at?
Absolutely. There are like as many routes as you would like to do. Cayambe has like the classical, the technical one, call it like Santa Barbara. It's a mixed climb, like it can be overhang, can be like, ice climbing. It's a beautiful route, can be like maybe up to sometimes 20 hours trying to climb that route. And
Awesome.
yeah, of Cotopaxi, I have tried like, the east face, which is like has the one of the lowest glaciers in the Ecuadorian mountains. Should be like 4,400, 4,500 meters that the glacier start, but it's like a lot of crevasses, a lot of, terrain to negotiate. Also, Cotopaxi has like traditionally the south face
Mhm.
is really good to climb that one. But you need more days. Actually, in these routes, you need like a approach. You need like maybe 3 or 4 days for each kind of these routes. And Chimborazo, of course, Chimborazo has like four summits. Sometimes you make like the traverse of these four summits. So sometimes takes like 6 days or something like that. But maybe once every 2 years, once every 3 years, some people are really interested on those routes. And then we also can do that. But they are like, of course, more technical and you need more experience for those routes.
Awesome. We do work with climbers on like private, customized, really unique itineraries. One of the photos I showed earlier, actually from the pre-expedition, that was Emma Sherwin. She summited Everest with us this year, but she was in Ecuador this season before, right before it, training for her 8,000 meter climb with Edgar. And that was a really custom trip we helped put together. And she did the training she really needed to be on Everest this season, which is cool. So I put that private climb in there. That info is there. And we're always happy to work with you on something unique or special if you have your eyes or something that just caught your attention. Start kind of getting towards wrapping up. We're going to talk about training and gear, friends and family, and then that'll pretty much be it before we do our contact and philosophy. So we're going to go on to training. I'm going to be putting, just so you all know, a number of previous webinars into the chat box. We've done webinars on training with Mark Postel and Lisa Thompson, nutrition with Rebecca Dent out of Chamonix. She's amazing. The Acclimatization webinar with Nick Hart from the Altitude Center and the folks from Hypoxico, they were there. And then we just did a wonderful webinar on breath work and how it can be incorporated into your training regime to help train your lungs and get your lungs more ready. We just did a webinar on that as well. So we were mentioning earlier that the climbing is still very technical. Ecuador is still a very, intense place to climb, even though there are some nicer things like mountain huts. By all means, folks, do not underestimate your training at all. Edgar, can you tell us a little bit more about what folks should be doing to get ready for Ecuador?
Definitely, like the best training, as I told you, like the best training for the mountains is in the mountains. If you have a chance to go to the mountains, at least maybe 2, 3 days per week, that would be ideal. But not many people have like that much time. Walking with a 40 pounds pack is really, really good. We have to be like able to do that. We have to be able to like walk 6, 8 hours with this kind of weight. And then very important is also do some training at home, some like a cycling, swimming, some endurance, some cardio. It's very, very important to do that for the mountains. But most of the time is we are like working, we have no time. But for sure for our mountains, you need to be like a physical fit. You need to be like focused on training. If you want to invest coming to the mountains in Ecuador, don't underestimate. It's not vertical, it's not overhang, but still you are in the high altitude. You still are with the heavy packs. You still need to go like one step in front of the other. So you need to be prepared for going maybe 10 to 15 hours in a row. So you need to be prepared for that with the backpacks, with your legs, with your equipment, with everything. It's very important to be very, very focused on training. It's, training would like help you to enjoy really the climbs. Otherwise, sometimes you are like suffering, you are disappointed, you are frustrated. You don't want to know anything about the climbs after this suffering. So training is very, very important. It's highly recommended. Stephanie said, like, you have also like very nice, Mark Postel, he's like the best, I would say. He does the best tips that, if you have a chance to contact him, is this kind of the best advices. He will like put from sea level to the Everest summit with his advices.
Mark is awesome. He is one of our guides here, and we absolutely love working with both he and Lisa. In fact, I do want to include, once you sign up for Ecuador, we send everyone 2 pieces of training support. We send you a training primer written by Mark, and then we send you an Ecuador specific training guide designed by Lisa. And so both of those are really compatible together, and they'll really work to support you. And I love just that idea. Like, you're going to have more fun. It's going to be more rewarding. It's going to be more enjoyable if you're ready, if you're trained, if your physical fitness is in a high level. So, folks, we've been talking about training for Ecuador, but I want to flip it around a little bit to Benny, because what if we're training for Everest? And that's the idea here. I know you've kind of been talking about this a little bit, Benny, but I know you mentioned Ecuador is training for Everest. So can you talk more about how you feel about training for Ecuador, but also really training for Everest and how this fits in?
Yeah, I would say all mountaineering training, for the most part, goes hand in hand. It works for whatever trips you might be getting ready for. It's different if you're training for rock climbing or ice climbing or skiing specifically, but mountaineering, the idea is long days, bunch of them in a row, maybe carrying a backpack, walking uphill, walking downhill, walking across a hill. Your legs are going to need to really carry you along the way. The way I train around here is I carry a giant water jug up my favorite, like smallest local mountain, and I dump it out on the top so I don't have to carry the weight down. And the longer that I go mountain climbing, as the years have gone by, sure, I can do it faster than I used to be able to, but it's just hard every single time. And how you train, this is like being a football coach or something, but it's true. How you train is how you're going to feel on the mountain. It's a lot easier to go mountain climbing if you're in good shape. So if you have a gym nearby, get on the Stairmaster, wear a weight vest, wear a weighted backpack, whatever you have, even without a backpack, still okay. And work at it. It's just going to build for years and years. And eventually, if you want to climb Mount Everest, that years of work's going to come handy for you. And here in Ecuador, yeah, it's a spot along the way. You'll know where you're at. If you didn't train enough, you'll know like, okay, I got to ramp it up for my next ones. And if you were training hard and you perform great, then that'll be a super confidence boost for you.
Perfect. So, folks, don't skimp on the training. Never skimp on the training, but especially not for Ecuador. It's an intermediate peak. There's some easier things, but that doesn't mean you should train any less, because we want you to have fun. We want you to be successful. We want you to hit those summits just like these guys here, because that is just way more fun to stand up there and smile. Our last real core content slide that we have here is gear. There's a lot of gear talk that we could have. I have linked here, of course, our gear webinar. And then we also just recently published a blog about how to buy gear on a budget, which is really helpful. That's one of the most common questions we get across all programs is budgeting for gear. So we have a nice blog that gives you some tips and tricks, and I would love it if you check that out. We also have a Facebook group that we help moderate that is buying and selling of used climbing gear. And I know that I've seen a ton of our climbers pop up with stuff on there, which is super cool. So I'm going to jump to Benny first on this one because Benny, you're the product manager guy. You were the one who just interfaced with our gear list for the first time there. You actually want us to add a couple things to it, which is super cool, or highlight a few things to it. Benny, tell us more about the gear you think is really essential and some of those pieces that you wouldn't go to Ecuador without.
I'm not going to follow your bullet points here. I think this is all good stuff and everyone should read this, but I'm going to go on my own little blurb. So yeah, first of all, you don't need all the camping stuff that you would normally bring, which is great. You're going to need your sleeping bag. It's in the gear list there, but you don't need your sleeping pads. You don't have to carry a tent. You don't have to carry a stove. This is all awesome stuff. So we can go a little smaller backpack. The thing in Ecuador that we were talking about is you might get the rime ice on you, right? So I don't normally climb with a hard shell pant, for example, or a hard shell jacket. Usually they're like living in my backpack and I don't actually take them out. Down here, it's great to have them. We wore hard shell stuff on both Cotopaxi and Chimborazo. You can have lighter weight hard shells or heavier. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, because it's so cold, but definitely having those that fit that you can walk in. So test out your hard shell pant ahead of time with other layers. But generally you're dressing like, a little warmer than you might on Mount Baker, Mount Rainier. You're going to have another layer on your legs, potentially, like a long underwear, a soft shell pant, and a hard shell pant, something like that. Your upper body, same thing. We're going to layer similar, but we're going to bring our big parka. It's going to be ready in our backpack. We have on here the mittens. I love my mittens. I don't know. I know people, it seems like the thing today that people love wearing their glove. But if you're on a mountain with me, and again, I live in Alaska where we have like real winter that lasts like 7 months. I wear my mittens all the time because your fingers are incredibly important. So bring a good pair of mittens, use them for future trips. You're going to benefit from the mileage you have wearing them. So this is a good spot to do that. And we have there the face glove. I actually have one here with me, so I can briefly show you. It fits like this over your face. And these are awesome. They don't cost much money. They're like $20. A guy makes them at home in New Hampshire. He's an awesome guy, and he'll be super personable with you. So get one of these. This protects your nose and your cheeks. Take this on any mountain you go anywhere around the world. It's good for the sun, the wind, the snow, whatever you can come up with. And it helps keep from fogging up your glasses or goggles. So yeah, definitely get one of these. Face glove, flex, awesome piece. But overall, yeah, similar kit to what you might bring for sort of standard mountaineering. So it's another good time to test out different layers, see if things fit with you. Personally, I wear a lot of like synthetic fill jackets and not down, which I find to be helpful in an environment like this where they might be getting a little wet from if a wet cloud comes through. So yeah, that's sort of the gear rundown. We have 50, 65 liter climbing pack. That's great. There's a lot of good ones out there. But if you have any extra things on a trip like this that you're not sure of, just bring them to Quito, and your guide is going to sit down with you and go through all the stuff you brought in your duffel bags. And he's going to say, bring that one, not that one, things like that. And you'll be all set.
Awesome. Edgar, I'd love to hear from you. What kind of tips and tricks, what are you running into a lot that maybe people are not getting quite right or bringing too much of? What advice would you give for gear related to this program?
Yeah, I have seen especially nothing against, but they are bringing the big backpacks. Sometimes 100 liters, sometimes 120. Of course, sometimes they want to check the gear here. They are before going to big mountains like Everest or so. But in Ecuador, we, as I told you, is a alpine style. We mountain guys, we use a backpack of 35 liters, and everything fits there and more. Robe and the first aid kit and more than a normal client. So don't bring these huge packs. And also the sleeping bags shouldn't be minus 40 or something, unless you want to try before Everest, as I told you. But bring minus 5 or something Celsius is enough for Chimborazo, for our mountains. Usually our accommodations there are not too cold. We are inside this infrastructure. And also, it's very important that all the equipment, if you have your own, is the best. Of course, in Ecuador, we have a lot of rentals. If for some reason you miss something, we are ready to rent. But own equipment is the best. You know how it works. You know how the zips, where they are, the pockets and everything. It's really, really important to try those before you come here. And anyways, of course, you just follow the list because the list is like, proof the last 7 years in Ecuador. Every year, every trip, we are like kind of doing some updates. I think the last updates we have done already, like, yeah, I think it's the right list that we need for Ecuadorian mountains. So follow that list and I think everything should be okay.
Yeah, perfect. And then
Yeah.
this isn't really gear related, but we're thinking about the huts. We're thinking about what to bring. I know, Edgar, you described it as like a little hotel in the mountains. And I think that's a sweet way to think about it. So, folks, remember, like, you might bring like a bowl and a plate to Baker, but you don't need to bring that to Ecuador. And they can accommodate dietary needs there. Even if you do Chimbo, it's that tented camp that's already set up for you. It's going to feel a lot more like it's already been there, it's already set up, feel more like a nicer accommodation than just a tent on the side of a mountain. So really thinking about that gives a nice look at all the gear we need and kind of what to expect food-wise and nutrition-wise on the mountain. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Family and friends in Ecuador. This is probably one of our favorite things to talk about, besides the mountains themselves, are all the fun things you can do with family and friends, either on our main itinerary or outside of that. So, Edgar, can you tell us a little bit about the ways we can involve family and friends in this expedition or after this expedition?
Absolutely. Like Ecuador offers a bunch of possibilities. It's not only about climbing, but it's about many things, about culture, it's about, rose plantation, it's about cuisine, hot springs, historical haciendas from more than 400 years. You can either connect all these attractions with the parallel with your climbing trip. Sometimes the families, they came like, women are climbing, husbands are like in the hotel working or something. But parallel, sometimes they do like a day hike and in the night they meet each other while doing some different activities, but still doing together somehow. It's a bunch of possibilities here in Ecuador in that sense. Also, like after the climb, sometimes people are, if you have more time, of course, Ecuador offers like an amazing, Galapagos Islands. It's like kind of a unique place in the world. You can dive there, you can make a cruise there. You can also just chill there. There are beautiful beaches there in Galapagos, really good food. Also beautiful nature, unique nature there. Even we have penguins in Galapagos. So you can go to Galapagos, 4 or 5 days, 8 days if you have more time. But also we have, Amazon jungle. Amazon jungle is not that dangerous like, Indiana Jones said, like, guys, dangerous, everything is, it's bad there, anacondas, mosquitoes, but it's not really like that. Amazon jungle offers like a beautiful, nature as well, nice fresh rivers, beautiful animals, different cuisine there is another really good experience. But also we have, like the Pacific, we have like more than 1,000 kilometers of like a coastal region. We have so many places, so many beaches. The seafood is, the highlight. I love seafood. Really fresh seafood there is like a kind of the best there. If you want to go someday there, maybe after the climb, 2 3 days to relax and then you go back home. It's really, really rewarding there. It's so beautiful. Yeah, you can do these activities. More than that, like also you can visit like the indigenous community here in the highlands. We have like very traditional here food. I know it's like a bit complicated to explain. Try to come here and then maybe we can try to do that.
Yeah. Edgar, you've been painting such beautiful pictures of everything there is to do outside of these peaks in Ecuador. So the jungle, going out to the Galapagos Islands, hot springs, the seafood. It's historical. There's colonial history. There's indigenous history. There's all these different pieces. And so, folks, if you caught it, you can have a family or friend join you and do the regular itinerary with you, just not summit. You can also have a family and friend join you and just do kind of your own thing during the day. You can do something afterwards if they can't be there for the 11 days of the program. There are many different ways that we can involve family and friends via extensions or just a separate itinerary while you are in country, which is really cool. Benny, you were just there. How did the hospitality and the warmness of the Ecuadorians treat you?
Yeah, it's great. People are very lively, friendly. There's a lot going on. There's people driving everywhere and going to all these restaurants. There's just like people walking around. And yeah, it's a very lively place. Everything's happening at once. We went to a hot springs when we were there during our trip, and it was fantastic. I mean, the food was great, the lodging was great, the rest was great in the hot springs. I feel like across the country, there's just sort of enjoyable things to do. I'm actually planning to do a vacation there with my significant other in the future because of this past trip.
Welcome. I show you more.
Perfect.
That's perfect. So we always like to take a moment, oftentimes in our webinars that we do, especially on our various expeditions and programs, and talk a little bit more about our philosophy. Here at Climbing the Seven Summits, our two top priorities are safety and success, and always in that order. It's really important to us to be safe climbers, and ideally, we want you to be successful climbers and reach your goals, reach those peaks, reach those summits. It's in our name, Climbing the Seven Summits. We specialize in the seven summits, but we also specialize in progressing you through the seven summits or progressing you to whatever your goal is. If you have a goal of K2, we're going to, by golly, help you get there and help you set up the correct climbs to get there. Mike Hamill is our founder and our owner. He's lapped the seven summits, I think it was 6 times or something like that. And he wrote the guidebook called Climbing the Seven Summits as well. So we are here to really help you get to wherever you want to go. We are really proud of all of our leadership and guides, and we're also proud of all of our climbers. One thing that sets us apart is that we are truly highly selective. We want to have people that really believe in 2 of our core philosophies, which are the marginal gains philosophy and our no dickheads policy. Very different, very important. Marginal gains just means that the little things matter. Going to the hacienda, eating well on the mountain. Even when we're on Baker, we got real food, real coffee, real bacon on Baker. So you can worry less about struggling and worry more about the climbing, the learning, everything that you're doing on the mountain. So those little tiny gains add up to a whole lot of big gains on the mountain. So that's the essence of our marginal gains philosophy. We also have a no dickheads policy. This is borrowed from the New Zealand All Blacks, their rugby team. And it's just clear as day. We want to have people that have a team mindset, that are here for the right reasons, that are climbing in good style, that are taking care of themselves and of each other, communicating things like that. This is a policy that we apply to not only our climbers, but also our guides and our staff as well. We want everyone to be kind people, and we really ask people to think about how they're going to bring that to the mountain by having a no dickheads policy. And then we just want to give a nod to the fact that, of course, you have to be fit. Of course, you have to be strong. Of course, you have to have the right gear. But climbing is mental. It requires a commitment. It requires deep humility. It requires us all to really look inside, drop the ego, and be kind people, to communicate and to show up for the right reasons. Those are some of the core things that we believe set us apart as an operator on any peak we climb, and also raise us to being the expert leaders and the expert guides on the mountain. So those are really important things for us. You can see Edgar's smile there, just the team energy. We really try to bring that to all of our climbs, just to be welcoming, kind, and to make this the best experience as possible. So with that, I also want to drop in our contact here so you can see our Instagram, Facebook, and our website. Also, there is our email info at. If you'd like to drop us a message on any of those platforms, by all means, go for it. And you can also go ahead and just directly book a call. Caroline Pemberton is our co-owner, but she's always happy to book a call with you to talk about your goals, talk about your progression, things like that. And I think I'm going to leave it with Benny and Edgar just to give any last little thoughts on Ecuador, or just in general climbing and reaching your dreams and reaching your goals.
Yeah, I'm really happy to tell you a little bit about my country, but try to come to Ecuador. If you have some time, it's not that far away. Now the connections of the fly are very close. Try to come here and I will show you every little corner of my country if needed, but I will be ready for going to the big mountains to show you how it works really here, climbing these beautiful, amazing mountains.
Thank you, Edgar. We so appreciate you being here and sharing your wonderful country with all of us. Benny, any last thoughts about Ecuador or just about big mountain goals?
I hope you go to the mountains. I love going. I always feel better when I come back from the mountains. Ecuador, as we've been talking about, is a great country. I hope you visit there, and other parts of the world as well. And if you'd like to climb a mountain with me, feel free to ask the office, and we'll try to make it happen. But stick to the training, get excited, read the books, watch the YouTube videos, whatever. Mountaineering is a whole world, and it's an incredible place to be a part of, no matter what level you're at or what level you dream of getting to. So enjoy the journey, and feel free to reach out to me anytime with any questions.
Awesome. Okay, folks, I just want to say a quick thank you again, Edgar, Benny. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Climbing the Seven Summits for hosting this wonderful webinar today. And thank you to everyone that was here today. Another great webinar in the books. Folks, keep your eye out for our next webinar. I think it's going to be Denali. Also, we put something pretty cool on our Instagram and Facebook today. If you have eyes on Everest in the next couple years, go take a peek at that. All righty. I think that's all from here. Much appreciate you all. And bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye,
Bye.
everyone.